Welcome to No Place Like Home with Mike and Megan Orp, where we believe the center of the universe is your home and our home and every other home on the planet. On this podcast, we talk about anything related to that. Parenting, homeschooling, marriage, anything, as long as it has to do with being home.
Today we'll be talking about homeschooling.
And specifically, why we homeschool.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
We want to welcome everybody to the podcast today. We're glad you're here.
We're glad we're here. It feels like it's been a while. We had a week off because of vacation.
Yep. It
And
feels like forever, actually, since we've recorded.
It does.
I'm not sure what day we actually recorded, but it's good to be back.
Yeah,
And
it is really good to be back, even though we've only done this a handful of times. Which number is this?
This would be episode 5.
Yeah, even though we've only done this now, this is our 5th time, it feels good to be, it feels like I'm coming home.
Yeah. So thanks for coming along for the ride, and we appreciate your support by listening and also by reviewing the podcast.
Yeah.
And thought it might be fun to go over some of our new reviews just for fun. All right, so I'm going to look at, I've got the last couple.
Okay.
Why don't we read from those? I'll read one of them, okay?
Okay.
This is from Marlette5. I think I'm saying that right.
Marlette, yeah.
She said, I'm so grateful for Mike and Megan and their example. I have been following them on YouTube for a while and have always admired their family life. This podcast has been so awesome and validating for me because I feel so much of the same things regarding myself and my family. Keep shining your light on the world, Norps.
Wow,
With
thank
an exclamation point. I might not have said that quite as excitedly as she wrote it, but
You should also know that Mike does not use exclamation points. He doesn't waste them, even in text. They're used sparingly. Well, I want to read the next one from Foxy Hawks. Love this. I'm so glad to be here to listen to this. Makes you see how we can change the future by working on our home. I will be a homie for as long as you do this podcast. Thanks for the wisdom of wonderful thoughts and words. I absolutely love that. Thank you, Foxy Hawks.
Foxy Hawks.
I
Nice.
love that you will be a homie with us.
We should start saying welcome, homies. At the
Welcome,
beginning.
homies.
I don't know how you say that in proper grammar, but welcome, homies.
Yeah, and if you weren't on our last episode, we got to do like a celebration of home. I think I'll probably do that again because I think a lot of my thoughts about home have changed a lot as I've grown up, and I've come to see how like it really is the center of the universe. So I didn't just like make that up. Like I really do believe that home is the center of the universe. I mean, like
in your brain.
I feel like it came from outside of me. Like it was like this idea that like kind of like descended one day, and it was like home is like everything. It's the center of the universe. And I think that probably most people would say that if like, yeah, I guess it probably is. I mean, where else would it be? But like,
Right.
I don't know. I really believe that these days, and it's changed a lot of my focus.
Sweet.
And thus we have a podcast.
There we are. So also, why don't we look at some new patrons that we have? We do have a Patreon connected to the podcast because this does take a fair amount of time and energy to get done, and Patreon helps us to get these things done.
Yeah,
So-
about that time. So thank you so much.
Right. For all of our patrons, we really appreciate you and wanted to shout out to those who are new patrons. So I'm going to go down the list here. And if I say your name incorrectly, I apologize. I'm sorry. But we've got Maja, who celebrated at the Come Over Anytime level. Arden, Come Over Anytime as well. Tuesday, just saying hi. We actually know Tuesday from...
Hi, Tuesday. Thank you so much.
We've just been...
Long-time follower.
Yeah, Tuesday's been around for a long time with their YouTube channel, and really appreciate that support. Renee at the Sit and Stay a While. Jesse at the Sit and Stay a While, and Anna at Sit and Stay a While.
Thank you so much, guys.
That's really, really awesome. We know some of you are overseas, which is kind of cool for us, and I really appreciate your support. So we also did our live event a couple weeks ago, or was it a week ago?
I think it was only a week ago. It was just, maybe it was a couple.
Yeah.
Man, Thanksgiving.
I think it was 2 weeks ago because we had Thanksgiving week. And we had a great time.
We did. It was just us and Melissa. Melissa, we had a great time, didn't we?
It was really fun to hang out with Melissa. We could talk directly with each other and had a nice conversation.
It was really great. We got to hang out with Melissa, and I wanted to give a shout out to Melissa's husband, Joseph, because she says he listens with her. So hello.
All right, Joseph.
It was really fun. It was like, I don't know, like every time I meet someone that follows on our channel or follows here on the podcast, it's a real privilege.
Yeah.
And that was no different. It was really nice to spend some time. And we do those once a month.
Yes.
So if you want to join us next time, we know that like it doesn't always work out timing wise. So we actually, your first instinct is to always have it at the same time each month. But we realize that would probably, if somebody can't make it, then they'll never be able to make it. So we're going to switch it up on what day and time we hold it on. And if you just go over to our Patreon,
we'll post it there.
Page, you can see that when the next one is.
So that's for all of our come over anytime people.
And above, yeah.
So yeah, we hope to see you there. And with that, I think we'll move into, or do you want to talk a little bit about what we've been thinking about? I don't know.
Well, you will definitely have to excuse, we have been unpacking all of our Christmas decor items.
Yes.
And it is confirmed for me that I must have an allergy to dust because my nose is going crazy.
A little bit stuffy.
Yeah, every time I'm like rummaging through these boxes and trying to like get out ornaments and garlands, I've just been sneezing like crazy, and so you'll have to forgive me if I think Mike will probably try to edit all of that out, but
oh, you're sniffling?
Yeah, my sniffling and I might pause for a long, long time. You won't hear it. I just wanted to say it if my voice sounds a little weird, but.
So it is that time of year. We've been unpacking boxes of Christmas stuff, trying to make the house feel Christmassy.
Which is fun.
That's always fun and enjoyable.
I'm a big believer in celebrating every season. That's something that has changed for me. I think that's an idea I came across while living in the RV.
Yeah.
If you guys don't know, Mike and I spent a year traveling the country in our RV with our 9 kids, and then we traveled around Europe the year after that. And I guess it probably has nothing to do with the traveling. That was just when I first heard it, and probably a lot of you have heard it, but it's the idea of hygge, spelled Hygge, and it's like how a lot of people in these northern European countries, Scandinavian countries, are really happy even in their dark winters. And the idea is it's that how do you do that? And it's this hygge, like it's the comfort and it's the celebrating even the dark times of year. And they don't try to make, this is a new idea to me, they don't try to make dark times of the year like not dark.
Right.
Like they let it be a dark time of year. They light candles. They keep the lights lower in their house.
Right.
Which was a totally new idea to me. And I think in America, we definitely have like such a desire to create light and bright rooms. If you watch any of those like design shows, it's always like, well, this is a light room and more light and more windows and, the lighting just to have it be as bright as possible. And so that was like, what? Why would you want it to be dark in a dark time of year? But I now see it as like a celebration of a different time of year, and that it creates, you're not pushing against it, you're embracing it, and you're finding the good parts of it. And so since we got back from traveling, I've tried to do that more, and I will actually change out my decor a little bit and what is hanging on my walls to reflect the colors and the feelings of that season or a holiday. Now, I'm not a huge fan of like how like now there's like World Pizza Day and like World Everything Day all of the time. There's all these like crazy, yeah, like that's a little much for me. But I do think that there's something to be said for like honoring different feelings and different seasons and different times, and so that you feel happy. So I think it's almost like a gratitude because you recognize the good in it. And so instead of now, like I have more lamps, I don't try to make every room in the house as bright as it possibly can be. Like, I know when in the past when talking about paint colors, it's always like, oh, you don't want to do that color because it'll make it feel too dark in here. It's like, hey, it might be okay to have a room that's not as bright, but it's different. It's a cozy room. It's maybe a restful or calmer room or whatever. And so I think celebrating or hygge is a gratitude for every season of life and every season of the year. And so
kind of embracing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So getting out my Christmas stuff. I mean, everybody's getting out their Christmas stuff, but we had fall stuff out, and after we put our Christmas stuff away, it'll be more of a celebration of winter instead of like, oh, all the leaves are gone and like, oh, it's so ugly outside. It's like maybe it's quiet outside, or maybe it's cozy inside, or whatever it is. Like, so that's helped me actually celebrate home even more because it's cozy, or it's whatever, depending on the season.
That's great. So maybe with that, we should move into the real topic of today, which is homeschooling. And this, the reason we're addressing this is because on our live, Melissa asked specifically if we would talk about homeschooling because she's doing that or does that. And I think I'm going to guess that a fair amount of our listeners are considering or are homeschooling, and we are, I wouldn't say advocates, but we are fans of homeschooling.
I'd say we're advocates.
Sure.
What would make someone, we advocate it? That's what we're going to do today.
For it.
Yeah.
But we don't like go out in public and hold up signs and say you should homeschool your kid.
Yet.
That's next. So what we thought we'd do today is talk about why we started homeschooling.
Why we kept homeschooling.
And why we've kept homeschooling, and why we will never stop homeschooling, I think.
Yeah.
Is that right? I think that's what we wanted to go over.
Yeah.
And then whatever is kind of connected to that, we'll sort of see. So if we kind of go back in our history a little bit, we started homeschooling back when Elijah was how old?
He was second grade.
Second grade.
I wanted to homeschool. I think
our purpose, our reason for homeschooling, has kind of stayed the same, but has also evolved a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
So we can kind of go through that.
Yeah, and so I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I went to public school. Mike went to public school.
Yeah, neither of us were homeschooled.
I don't know if I knew any homeschoolers. I did have a friend who was homeschooled for a couple of years, but I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
Actually, I have two friends who told me once we were in college or older, like they were homeschooled. I'm like, yeah, I wondered where you went. That was weird. And so
as kids, we're so not aware of what's happening around us.
I don't even know if I had a concept of homeschooling. It was very different then. We both graduated in 1997.
We essentially came from very little experience with that concept, other than kind of seeing people do it from the sidelines.
Yeah, and so it grew. Elijah was my first, and when he came onto the scene, one of the things I noticed that kind of blew me away was that he spent all of his time with me, and I was obviously you were there too, but
well, I was working.
You were working more or gone more often, but I was like, I am introducing him to everything in the world, like everything.
Yeah.
He's come, he knows nothing. He is like a total blank slate.
Yeah.
And not only am I introducing it to him, but I'm also framing it for him, like what it is, which really blew my mind. And I felt like I thought about that a lot over those first several years. And then Andrew came onto the scene when Elijah was 3. And it was like, not only am I like, if I'm showing them something, I'm also like
interpreting
it for them and telling them like, they can, even if I don't say it, they can tell the tone of my voice and my body language, all of these things, like whether this thing is good or bad or exciting or scary or all of these sorts of things, right?
Right.
Something you should trust or something you shouldn't. And that really blew my mind. And so I really enjoyed being a part of it. I really enjoyed being there for these moments when he was learning things. And so as we approached school, I was like, it wasn't on my radar.
Homeschooling wasn't?
Yeah, no. It was. I didn't know anybody still who was doing it, but I think
there definitely wasn't anyone in our community when we were adults and it was time to send Elijah to kindergarten. We didn't know anybody.
No, and I said something to my mom like, "Hey, I think I might homeschool him. I just would kind of like to be the teacher, you know." And she was like, "No, homeschooling's it's like," and she wasn't like, "Oh, homeschooling's so bad." She was just like, "Homeschooling's something you do when the schools are failing you."
Right, where they're just horrible schools.
Yeah, like, situation. And I think I heard somebody, like, maybe at church who had lived in a bad city and had moved from that city and said, "Yo, yeah, when we were there, the schools were so bad in our area that we had to homeschool a couple of years." And I was like, whoa, cool. Like, right. That's a new idea. And I think also, like, I was young and I was thinking outside the box. So I was open to anything.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, okay, and we lived in a really good school district. But as I sent him to school, or even in the days leading up to sending him to kindergarten, I was like, I don't know this woman. And he's going to be spending, I don't know her at all. And it was her first year teaching. I don't know what she likes or what she believes. Like, I don't know her. But she is going to be spending 6, 7 hours with my child 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because not only was I defining what the world was, I was also kind of, Elijah didn't know anybody but me really. I mean, he had friends whatever, but his belief about himself was shaped by me and the way I responded to him and the way I reacted to who he was. And so I was suddenly like, wait, I've been trying really hard to be really careful about that. And is this woman going to do that?
Sure. You realize you're handing over something to essentially a stranger.
Yeah. And it felt very unnatural. So that's where I was at when Elijah started kindergarten. And, maybe it was fate that...
Call it fate. Call it karma.
I believe that everything happens for a reason.
What movie is that?
Oh, yeah. Anyways, so she wasn't that into Elijah. She wasn't a fan, so to speak. And he was getting in trouble a lot. And,
well, not a lot. But, I mean,
he was getting in trouble. And for things that I thought she had misinterpreted. And I don't mean this I didn't say that to her, but I was like, he's a really obedient kid.
Yeah.
And pretty straightforward. But she also put him in tutoring, which I thought was strange. And it just didn't, it confirmed, she doesn't know him.
Yep.
And she's defining for him already by putting him in this, he had to go twice a week to this tutoring class. So suddenly he gets the message, you're behind.
Right.
You can't keep up. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I feared. But then we moved and I was like, oh, should I homeschool? Should I homeschool? I don't know. And we tried it again. And this year, the second year.
Public school.
Yeah, the second year, he had an amazing teacher. She was like the teacher you dream of.
Yep.
And she adored Elijah.
Well, she'd been teaching for decades.
Yes.
And as opposed to this person who had zero experience.
Yeah, she had zero experience. She actually said at the beginning of the year, I never thought I'd be a teacher, but here I am. And she only worked 1 year, then she got married and she quit. So the second teacher, and also that, it takes a while to build up your classroom. So his kindergarten teacher had nothing in there. And I remember Elijah saying she's mostly just on the computer looking at wedding dresses. Hey, awesome. I can't blame her. But so then the next year it was this beautiful classroom. It was in a different school that was built in the 60s. So it was all the classrooms had windows and it just felt totally different vibe in there. And Elijah loved it and he loved her. And she would even say nice. Elijah's really gifted about this. She saw what was special about him and she made him feel special.
Yeah.
And so then you're like, huh. So, I mean, it's not always bad.
Right.
But I knew that but I don't know who his teacher will be the next year or the year after that. It wasn't just that I realized. It was that's one thing. But the other thing is I want to be there. Mm-hmm. I want to spend those hours with him. And so anyways, the next year we went ahead and I had a close friend that was also in the same place. And she was like, I'm going to start. And so I said, okay, I'll do it with you. We'll just start the same year. And we started with K-12, which is kind of online school. And there's so many of them now, but they send you all of the resources. You just follow through with their things, and that has
their curriculum.
Yeah. And it's a good first what is that called? It's a good way to get started.
Yeah.
Because it's very overwhelming at first, and so they kind of take care of those things, and then as you start to do it, you start to get more confident and realize what you actually want. And so I think a lot of people start with K-12. I think very few people finish with K-12. Yeah. But it gives you something to hold on to. And so I think maybe a lot of you who aren't homeschooling yet, very few people, if any, I don't know if they exist, do the same thing, same method or same curriculum all the way through.
for 12 years.
Yeah. So it's okay if you find something that just gives you enough confidence to do right now. That's what I did. And we did it for 2, maybe 3 years, maybe just 2.
Right.
And then we kind of figured some other things out. And it took us a while to finally settle on how we do it now. But
which was in 2012 maybe or 13 that we figured that out.
Figured
kind
what
of
out?
our current way of doing homeschooling.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a
10 years
total
ago.
of, how many years? It took a while, I guess,
like 5 years
to work through that.
And then really, even after that, it took another 5 to feel confident in it. Yeah.
So there's a couple of things there. One is that it's hard for a third party to, I think, appreciate and understand your child and appreciate their gifts and talents.
Yeah, so that was our first reason.
That was the first reason.
Yeah.
Because we have a firm belief, and this is, in general, we believe that every child is a genius, or every person is a genius.
Everybody.
And it's just a question of what kind of genius. And not every person is going to appreciate that, and school certainly may not
It
play
only
to
serves
that.
a very small, select group of geniuses.
Right. Well, that of a certain type.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal for us. And that's a big part of the reason why we encourage people to homeschool now, is because nobody knows your child better than you do.
Yeah.
And you can help them to explore their genius, essentially, and really become something special in and of themselves without having to jump through the hoops of a public school or compulsory school system.
Yeah, and we need to do a whole
That's
episode
a whole thing.
A whole episode on genius, because, like, I say it again, like, we believe every person ever is a genius.
Right.
You are a genius. All of your children are geniuses. All of our children are geniuses. I have my genius. Mike has his. And we're not using it lightly. Like that great line in The Incredibles, where he's like, I know everyone's special. He's like, but if everyone's special, then nobody is.
Right.
And it's not.
Everyone's a superhero.
Yeah, it's like, no, it's everybody is a genius in their own way. Like, really, they are.
Right.
And it doesn't have anything to do with IQ. IQ is measuring one very specific type of genius, and maybe not even very effectively. I don't know. But, like, I don't know. There are limitless ways that people are geniuses.
Right.
And so we could talk. Well, anyways, I'm getting on a tangent because I'm already talking about it.
Is by having your child at home, and by what we wanted to do was to help, because it takes time to figure out what that is.
Yeah.
To explore it and to really grow at it. And
I don't think we knew that, though. That was not really our reason for homeschooling until probably 5 years ago, 5 to 8 years ago.
Well, when we kind of started to make a switch to more of a, what some people call an unschooling method. But essentially, I think you understood that kind of.
Yeah, I did understand it intuitively.
Level.
Yeah, because, like, Elijah was he was a strange bird as a kid. He really was. And we laugh about a lot of his little idiosyncrasies now. But I also knew that he was incredibly gifted. Mm-hmm. I was really bummed out when he went to school and realized, that isn't really apparent to her. And she's communicating to him. Not only she's not recognizing his genius, but she's making him feel like he's broken.
Right.
Because and I'm not even, anyways, I could talk a long time about schools and.
Well, we could also probably say, because we sent our kids back to school once upon a time when we
our relationship with school was not over.
We kind of jumped back and forth a little bit
couple of times, yeah.
And one of the sort of big, I won't call it a moment, but something that highlights this is when Andrew went to school.
Oh yeah.
And if you've watched our channel and familiar with Andrew, he's very creative and that sort of thing. But his teacher that he had was nice, but
she liked Andrew.
She also tended to play up his what you might call, I don't want to call it a weakness, but
the things that if you're really good at some things, there's always going to be things that are
you're not
the opposite of that. There's an opposite side of a coin, right? And so there's always going to be things that you're not as good at. And she really focused on those and didn't focus on what he was good at.
Right.
And so
he started to identify as a person who is messy and
weird,
unorganized and strange.
And he became kind of the class clown.
Yeah.
And she was like, I give Andrew his own trash can, like, and I keep it right under his desk, and
Right.
which was funny. And she was doing it in good humor, and I think they've even stayed in contact because she really liked Andrew. But still, Andrew started to say things like, I guess I'm just weird. I'm one of those weird kids, or I'm a nerd, or whatever, And he was in 3rd grade, and it was like, oh. So yeah, that was one of the things. And I think one of the things that it wasn't only their genius, right? It was also their something I didn't know the word for. I think I've mentioned it here now, but I've learned since it's called a worldview.
Right.
And, what I was saying earlier, that I realized that I was defining not only who they were, but also what the world was. And every idea that you present to someone, you always have a bias. There's no unbiased giver of information. I mean, except for the world itself,
the pure information.
Yes.
But again,
when they say, Mom, why does this happen? And how does this happen? When you respond, there's a little bit of your bias there. I think bias can be really good because, there can be the bias of, why is it so dark in winter? And it's like, oh, well, it's, you teach them the scientific thing and then say, but isn't it kind of cozy?
Right.
Isn't it kind of nice to have a time of year where we can, come inside and be together and reflect on things and whatever? So, like, bias is so charged now as like a really negative thing. But I guess you're always adding in your feelings on something when you're teaching your kids. And I don't know
or when anyone's teaching your kids. Let's just say that.
And so I didn't know what they would be teaching them. And I guess that makes me sound a little bit of a control freak. But I am very, I think worldviews are really important. And I think we don't always recognize how we'll see things going on in our life, our kids' lives, and we're thinking, where is this coming from? It's a lot of the times coming from worldviews that are so quiet.
That are being taught.
And they're so quiet, and they're in their minds. And they're not talking about the worldview. It's like this thing at the very bottom of like, this is just how things are. Mm-hmm. It's just like everything comes, it's the foundation on which they build everything.
Right.
And at that time I was uncomfortable because I wanted somebody who would teach them wonder, who would teach them an excitement and zeal for things, and who would also like, Elijah never, when I tried to do like the cute answers where he'd be like, what is that? Why is the moon shine? And I'd be like, because it's happy. And he's like, you'd be quiet in the back seat, and he'd like, as a toddler, and he'd be like, but why?
But why does it really?
Yeah, like, but that doesn't, why does that, so then I'd be like, well, okay, let me tell you why it actually shines. Like, the sun, and it shines on the moon. And so it's funny, I remember him really bugging his like cousin in the car because like, he would always be asking questions like that, and he wanted an answer that actually made sense. He never wanted the sweet answer or just the fun answer, which Andrew loved those. But anyhow, so it was a worldview thing, and at that time, this is what, 15 years ago? Man, it seems like so much longer ago. At that time, I just knew that everybody's got a worldview and that they're communicating it to their students and on an individual basis. And it might just be like a negative worldview, or whatever.
Right. It could be a certain angle on any number of things.
Yeah. And that it was just like, or it just makes them feel like life is boring, or like life is all about like work, or like, you're not supposed to be happy or whatever. But these days... I think it's really interesting where we've gone with worldviews. I did not see it coming.
Right.
But I do think, and I think this is what we're arguing about when we're talking about, all of these parents and things out in the communities, when we're talking about things like critical race theory, when we're talking about gender ideologies. These are worldviews.
Sure.
And they affect everything. And in fact, I was just listening to a school administrator from, what state was it? Chicago? I mean, not
Detroit.
I was just listening to a school administrator speaking on a panel from Detroit, talking about how they are absolutely integrating the ideas of critical race theory into every aspect of the curriculum.
Yeah.
Not just history, but every aspect in every class. And that's a worldview.
Yeah.
And
that's overt.
Yes, and they're doing it. It's organized, and it's like every teacher is going to be doing it. So that becomes very powerful.
Yep.
Right? Because when I was worried about is just like this individual woman's worldview where she might think life stinks.
Right.
And is going to convey that to my child.
Uh-huh.
But now teachers are very organized and are taught worldviews. Like, I mean, when Elijah was in kindergarten, and definitely when I was in kindergarten, and maybe when you were in kindergarten, they weren't talking about like morality.
Right.
They weren't talking about these sorts of abstract ideas.
Yeah.
It was like test scores, math, reading level, that sort of thing.
But now they're weaving an ideology into all of it.
Yes, and you may believe in that ideology, you may not, but I think to think that it won't affect your child is a mistake.
Right.
And so that's why I will always homeschool.
Uh-huh.
We are very careful with our worldview communication in our home.
Right.
And I know that, we have some review that talks about how we like brainwash our kids, and it's like, whatever, everybody's brainwashing. I mean, we way overuse that term. Like there's an actual literal thing called brainwashing where people like do really bad things to people and like psychologically destroy them.
Yeah.
I think what that person actually means is I'm teaching my kids a worldview that they don't agree with and
Sure.
they don't want my kids to hear. And it's like, well, even more reason why I should be homeschooling them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you want to teach my child a worldview.
Uh-huh.
You don't want them to know my worldview. You want them to only know your worldview.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like you can't help but convey that to anyone you're teaching or talking to.
Yeah.
And so the question is, who's going to do it?
Yeah.
And in our case, we wanted it to be us because we know what we believe. We know what we kind of want our children to see the world, and so we just recognize that something's going to come through when someone is teaching, or there's even a textbook.
Oh yeah.
It all has an angle,
Yeah.
whether it wants to or not.
Yeah, and one of the things that helped me know that, even from a very young age, is we're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, nicknamed Mormons. And I remember even in elementary school reading about my group in textbooks.
Your church?
Yeah, my church, my religion, my church's history, and reading really weird things that weren't true.
Okay,
and being like,
yeah.
That's not true. And then you're like, wait, are there other things in this textbook that aren't true? Because that's a weird story that never happened. And then you're like, it's weird. Like, I remember how you'd like read things aloud in class, you just kind of go around the room and you're like, somebody's reading this paragraph about the Mormons. You're like, but that's not even true. Like, even as a kid, you're like, that's weird. And so that did help me always know about bias, I think, and understand that
from a
kind
young
of
age,
from a young
that.
age. But I will say that we're really uncomfortable with parents controlling worldviews because we just always assume that if a parent wants to control or even cultivate a certain worldview, that means they're not allowing their children to interact with any other worldview.
Right.
And that's, I mean, that I'm sure that is the case some of the time, but there are plenty of us that recognize that it's really important to expose our children to lots of ideas.
Right.
Like, just because we want to be the ones to help them navigate them doesn't mean we don't want them to know about them.
Sure.
That's one of the things we've always done a lot of in our home is we talk very, very openly and at length about lots and lots and lots of ideas.
Right.
And lots of subjects. And
and the great thing is that you get to be there to go on that journey with them. And I think it helps your relationship with them. It helps you maintain a certain level, I don't want to say intimacy, but you know what they're thinking and you know what's going on. So you can be there to be a part of that process, because I think we've talked about it before, but I think a lot of people think, well, teenagers have to learn things and kind of learn them on their own. And so that means they're probably going to be jerks to you part of the time or whatever. But if we're actually kind of along for the ride, as it were, and where they know that they can discuss these ideas at home, or can discuss the things they're reading about or learning about, then you maintain that relationship so that they don't wander off, and you're like, well, good luck out there. Hope it goes okay. But you can be there along for that ride. And it maintains a certain, I think, relationship, which is important to be there for.
Yeah, and maybe some of you listening find this to be very uncomfortable. Well, I guess then you have to know that somebody else is going to teach those worldviews. If you're like, oh, that's wrong of me to do that and to be that controlling, it's like, well, they're getting taught those worldviews.
Oh, sure.
By somebody that,
Somebody's
you know,
going to.
and you can't even be there. Like, they don't tell you what those worldviews. In fact, there's like so many things now. There was like that teachers conference in California that like they were actually teaching those teachers how to teach things without the parents
basically
finding out.
Yeah.
So like
Covert.
it's not only are they teaching your kids worldviews, they are like openly saying they don't even want you to know what they are because they don't trust you, which is like, I guess if you don't trust you either, just know that some other adult gets to decide to teach your child what the world is.
Yeah.
And I love my children to have mentors. I love having other adults in their life that to teach and to interact with. They watch lots of experts on YouTube that aren't of our faith, who don't have the same worldview as us. But we're going to talk about that person's worldview, and we're going to like throw around like, so, you know, what does he think about that? And what do you think about what he thinks? And, you know, we're going to wrestle through those. And I'm pretty comfortable doing that. I know that's maybe one of my geniuses.
Sure.
I'm very comfortable talking about difficult ideas. I like to do it. And so that's something we do a lot of. But
yeah, you don't mind the kind of debate and the back and forth on it.
Yeah. So like, I know that some people are like, oh, that's so wrong for you to do that to your kids. It's like, kids have to have that done to them.
Yeah.
They're an empty
it's
vessel.
Either you or someone else.
Somebody has to put that in there. And when whoever's doing it is curating a view of things. And so, I mean, it's like, I trust myself. I work hard to be a person who understands the world, who is measured, and who isn't just thrown about by emotion. I try to learn and research. I try to wrestle with hard ideas and so I trust myself to help my children navigate that. They know about all sorts of things I don't know about, but I also feel like we've taught them how to reason.
Sure.
And I don't, like to understand like how to take in information, pick it apart, decide like, is there evidence for that? Does that make sense? Is there anybody else saying these same sort of things? And do I see that? And all sorts of things, right? Because there's all sorts of ideas out there these days. But I don't know, if you don't trust yourself enough to have that sort of influence in your child's life, you maybe get to a place where you can.
Right. Because somebody's going to.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we fully thought that through when we first started homeschooling.
It was just kind of intuitive.
As our kind of our lives and the world has progressed, we have become more and more aware and grateful that we were able to help our kids to get through that. And we're continuing to do that. Because a big part of our life, and it's not even official schooling that we're doing when we're talking to our kids. It's just a constant sort of conversation that's happening either over the dinner table or on a drive or whatever.
Oh man, it's always, there's so much talking and going on in our house all the time.
Well, that's a whole nother, topic about how we kind of homeschool. It's not really, we don't sit down and teach a lesson. It's more of a
constant
conversation.
Yeah. And I think, so back to why we were doing it, that was it. That was part of it. It was just an unease about relinquishing.
I think that
role,
power, or what, I don't know what
that
you call
role
it. Yeah.
To strangers.
Yeah.
Because I knew they didn't love my child as much as I did. And I didn't trust the curriculum that much. Because it was always different, and I went to school. I didn't think it was like some flawless, beautiful like standard.
Yeah.
Like most of the time, who knew what we were doing in school? I didn't, So like, it wouldn't be like, well, you just have to trust, that the curriculum and trust the program.
The professionals know what they're doing.
Did you not go to school? Don't you remember? Most of the time, it was just like worksheets and teachers going out in the hallway to talk to other teachers and whatever. It's a hard job, but whatever. Yeah. But so that was part of it. The next thing was I remember sitting down with like a calculator and adding up all of the hours that I would gain if I homeschooled with my kids.
Right.
Just like the quantity of time. And it was crazy. It was like 40,000 hours or something. I don't remember.
Oh, it's so much.
So much time. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. So that was part of it. I liked my kids and I wanted to be with them. And I mean, everybody likes their kids, but I don't know, that was part of it. Those were the original ideas. And
then more things kind of come in
Yeah.
as you are homeschooling longer. You start to really despise all the hoop jumping that kids have to do at school and the schedule they have to keep.
The socialization that happens there.
The socialization with other kids, it's funny because a huge argument for homeschooling is that kids need to be socialized.
Or against homeschooling.
Against it. But then to observe kids as they, in quotes, socialize at school, all the negativity that comes out.
I mean, it's like, once again, like, did you go to school? School's like this crazy hierarchy of like cool kids and not cool kids. And I mean, it's
a mess.
Pretty intense.
Yeah.
So like, wait, is that the world we want to create? Like where like people feel like I have to be what they want me to be accepted. And so, I mean, and as time went on, like we had just today here in the real world right now, another tragic school shooting.
Sure.
And I remember the first one that happened. I remember we both said like, well, there's another thing we'll never have to worry about.
Right.
It's tragic. It's a parent's
safety.
Worst nightmare. And I think it's sad because we don't even talk about the details of them as much anymore. Because it's like, oh, there's another one. I mean, which is just devastating. But I don't remember which one it was, but it was like they were talking about like the minute by minute, the way it went down. And it was just like, I can't think of a greater nightmare for a parent. And like all the parents couldn't get in and they didn't know how their kids were. And, but yeah, I mean, that feels good.
Yeah.
And then having like other parents tell me about like the drills they have to do at the schools about, so like
active
if there's an active
drills.
shooter and you're like, oh my gosh, what
It's
are we
crazy.
doing? What is happening? And so, like there's lots of little things like that. But I think about 4 or 5 years after I started, I mean, it's hard. I cannot tell you that it's just some easy thing. There was so much fear I had to overcome and so many ideas from the world of like where I came from, where like school's good. And like, oh no, they'll never have recess. They'll never have field day. They'll never have PE. They'll never have prom. Like these were the gems of life, you know?
Right.
But that took years to like move through and to argue with myself about and to hear from other people.
Argue with other people.
Yeah. And when they would say it and it hurt and it was heavy because I wasn't completely convinced that those weren't important too.
Yeah.
And so, at that time I was talking to another homeschool mom and she kind of encouraged me to make a list of why I homeschool, like the 10 reasons or something, you know, and, I went home and I started making that list. I knew like 2 offhand, probably those 2 that I just said, but like we made it together. I remember us talking through them and it was really helpful.
Yeah.
And it really added a lot of passion to my homeschooling game. Like, okay, yeah, I do have some really important reasons. And so I think if you are considering homeschooling, or if you're new to homeschooling, or if you've been doing it for a while and you're still having a lot of anxiety or fears about those things, make a list of why you would homeschool or why you do homeschool and put it up on the wall. I'm pretty sure I put mine up on the wall to remind myself, this is why I'm doing this, like this, because, you know, you'll have a day where like your kid is struggling with reading something when their peer that's in school doesn't struggle with, or, you know, you'll have somebody say something to you like, so have they learned about this yet? Because in 2nd grade, they're supposed to be learning about this.
Sure,
like,
all the benchmarks.
like somehow that descended from like heaven of a second grader must be learning this. It's like somebody just put that together, like a group of adults. They just decided, hey, let's learn about that in second grade, Or I think people always say stuff about like, well, in fourth grade and in seventh grade, you're supposed to learn about your state.
Yeah.
Are they doing that? That sort of thing.
Right. You have to learn to, well, either let go of it, or I guess you could try to replicate that at home, but that's also difficult to do.
So, I mean, there was little things I picked up along the way that I'd be like, that's why I homeschool. And like one of them, I remember when we were doing like a homeschool co-op, which is where you can go like sometimes like one day a week and at a school or a church, and like there's just like little lessons and games so that you can, get together. And they were doing it at a school, and on the wall was a poster of the life cycle of a chicken. And we had chickens. We had like 50 chickens at this time.
Yeah.
And it was like so funny to me. Like, oh yeah, they just have it on a poster.
Right.
Like my kids see that every day. So I saw that poster and I'm like, that's why I homeschool. Because my kids don't need a poster. They know the ins and outs of that. Like we had goats and, like they understand, like they know this. We don't need a textbook to show us these things. We're out in it. Like even just like the seasons, I remember feeling so pleased that I had never experienced the seasons and the change of seasons in their minutia as much as we did now that we were homeschooling and we were out in them all the time. You notice the length of days. Like the kids would say like, Mom, it's usually dark at this time, but it's not anymore. Or like, the temperature or the little plants that are coming out of the ground, or, and on and on. Look, oh, this mushroom that's here. And so that I had to like record those though, because those are so quiet, and the voices of like, oh, what about this? What about that? And what about college? And like on and on and on were so loud. And so if you are, once again, I encourage you to keep a list, and it may be a running list where you're adding to it all the time. It might be little moments like that because they'll know the life cycle of a chicken and won't need it on a poster, or it might be more abstract ideas, like so that they will know who they are. But when you're doing something so new, which I'm assuming it is new to you if it's scary.
Yeah.
If you come from a homeschooling family or everybody around you is homeschooling, you probably don't need that list, as much. I mean, it's always nice to have, things
kind
to
of
remind you. Yeah, but if you are new, those things will be really, really helpful to you to turn to, because you'll have your doubts, and so will everybody else around you.
Yeah. Well, and another thing that I noticed the more we homeschooled, it was fun to see things and do things that as a kid I only saw in a textbook.
Yeah.
And I just saw pictures of certain places, and even things like, you're talking about some of the things in nature. Just the ability to experience some of these things in person with your children instead of just looking at a picture of it was gratifying for me. And it was great because I remember in school, you'd have like 1 or 2 field trips a year to somewhere.
Oh, and it was like the best.
Yeah, it was great. And it was somewhere close. But our whole, when your whole life can be a field trip, not everyone is free to travel, like we kind of did for a while. But it's very gratifying to let your kids experience the real world instead of seeing it through a textbook or through a screen. And
because it always looks and feels different.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
And like you smell it, you're there.
It's such a different sort of, you're immersed. And so that's a complaint I have about public school or compulsory school is that your children are shut off from the regular world or from the real world and don't experience it like an adult does. They're just looking out of a window at it, basically.
So it doesn't really prepare you for that.
And so, getting your kids to get out there and see it is very valuable. So that was not one of the original reasons we did it, but it certainly is one that happened as we did it.
Can you remember any specific ones? I remember us saying, like, I saw this in a textbook, and here we are.
Well, I mean, there's some big ones like Statue of Liberty, going by that on the ferry. Some of these beautiful things in nature, the Arches National National Park down in Utah. The Eiffel Tower.
Yeah. I remember though, like, was it, I mean, the General Sherman, the huge tree.
Oh, right.
There's no way to understand that tree unless you're there.
You just, the magnitude of it.
No, explaining to people, it's like, I cannot.
Yeah.
And maybe you're like, what? It's just a tree. It's like, you need to go see that tree. That tree's, and you really need to go see it too, because the fires have gotten really close. It might not always be there. Just like we got to see Notre Dame before it burnt.
Yeah, that was pretty
These
amazing.
things will not always be there. Things change, and not everything lasts forever. And so, like, General Sherman, man, that's a crazy experience. It's huge.
So another thing we advocate for is homework, working from home, so that you have the freedom to also go and see these things with your kids.
Yeah, homeschooling plus working from home is amazing.
Is a great combination if you can make it work. Because
you all get to experience life together.
Yeah, you get some more freedom to do that. And that just enriches the whole thing.
Yeah, we were living in Spokane when we really got into homeschooling. We had homeschooled in Utah before that, but we were living in Spokane, Washington. Which
is the eastern part of the state.
And we had a little farm, which was awesome for that phase of homeschooling. But then we wanted to start taking our kids out to experience more of those things that we had talked about. And so we went over to Seattle area. We went to Boise and to, the areas around there.
Yeah.
But everything was so far away.
Spokane is fairly remote.
Yeah, it's up near the Canadian border. It's farther north than the entire state of Maine. So that's also why we saw the seasons really acutely there, because days were long in summer and short in winter. But and so as we started working from home and had that freedom, we realized, I want to move somewhere where, as we're homeschooling, we can visit historic sites. We can visit a lot of different natural wonders, sorts of things. And so we didn't know where that place would be.
Yeah.
But ended up here in North Carolina, and it has been awesome for homeschooling. And after we moved here, we did what we called Family Fun Day a week.
Uh-huh.
And that was like our field day.
Sure.
Not field day. Those were our field trips. Yeah. And so we would go to historic sites, historic buildings, museums, hikes, caves. I would have died to go to a cave as a kid. Would have died. Yeah. I would have really, what is the coolest field trip you went on as a kid?
The only field trips I can remember were we had a local history museum in Boise, Idaho.
Yeah.
Which is, looking back, it may have improved since I went there, but it was fun.
That's because you weren't in the classroom, really.
Yeah, you're just out, so it was great. That's obviously, honestly, in my memory, that's the only field trip. I'd have to think a little bit, but that's the only one I can remember.
Okay.
Once we went downtown to a cathedral, which was cool.
Whoa.
There was a cathedral in Boise, like the one, and that was cool. That's about all I can come up with in my memories.
Yeah, I mean, you had a field trip every year, but the only one I remember, which was like a total corporate field trip, we went to the Astrodome, where the Astros played.
Yep.
And got the behind the scenes tour of the Astrodome.
Uh-huh.
And we did get to eat at Red Lobster.
What?
Because somebody's dad was the manager of a Red Lobster. So that was the highlight of the day.
I never got that.
Yeah, but really, it was just some guy this building was built in this. I mean,
it's just an advertisement.
That's cool and stuff, and yeah, and you get some little Astros paraphernalia, But that was mind blowingly awesome. I cannot remember any other field trips. But anyways, we digress.
Yeah.
But when we got to then out here, we chose this place on purpose because of that, because the coast is 3 hours away. There's mountains a couple hours away. You can get up to Williamsburg or Washington, D.C. or New York City in a single day's drive. That blew our minds, because in Spokane, you have Seattle and Portland, but it was spring break and we wanted to go somewhere warm.
And it was going to be a 20-hour drive.
20 hours to anywhere warm. No matter which way we figured it, we couldn't find anything closer than that.
It was a long ways away.
Yeah, and and Orlando's a day less than, it's 8 or 9 hour drive from here, not Orlando's the pinnacle of education
Orlando's
or something.
The best.
But they are pretty fun, those parks. But anyways, so I don't know if we were real clear on why we homeschooled then and now, but I totally and 100%, I really do believe that everybody should homeschool.
Yeah.
I know that's a crazy thing to say. Everybody's like, oh, you don't know our circumstance, but I just don't believe in the schools anymore, guys. I just really don't. And I'm not saying you need to start homeschooling tomorrow. I'm just saying start looking into it. If it just start reading some books. There's so many great books out there with so many different ways to homeschool and so many different ideas about it. There's so many great books that discuss like why school, I mean, like really point out like what's really going down there, like dumbing us down instead of education. Is that what it's called?
I don't remember.
I can't remember.
Dumbing us down is a big one, though.
Yeah, that's a big one. No, there's one other one. I think it's called Instead of Education. But I know that's kind of a crazy thing, but for a long, long time, I would just say, like, no, everybody's got to do what's best for them. And I mean, of course you do. But I just think it's gotten really clear that it's going to be really hard for your kids to be individuals in the school system anymore.
Uh-huh.
And it's going to be really hard for them to know their own genius and to really get to focus on a worldview that's expansive and open.
Right.
And really solidly planted in the scientific method and reason.
Right.
Which is really weird that I'm even saying that.
It is kind of strange.
And I know, and I talk to people and they're like, oh, I know that's happening, but I don't think that's happening in our school district. It is. Remember all curriculums these days come from one source.
Right.
It is. And teachers belong to the same unions. And now, I hope that I really sincerely hope that parents can regain control of that whole situation. But in the meantime, do you really want that worldview and all those weird things, like your kid gets thrown to that? Like,
right.
Until it gets figured out, maybe just take a break.
Yeah.
I know.
And we are a little more relaxed as far as if children are resilient, and even if they lose a little time or what you might think of losing time as far as school goes, they're still gaining and they're still learning.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of alarm last year in 2020 when they're like, "Oh no, what will happen to our children? Are they?
They've lost a year."
Yeah, and it's like, what are you guys talking about? You're crazy.
Yeah, it's
no. Listen, I will also say, I know that I'm saying something that is very much my opinion. But what's the point of having a podcast if I'm just going to say like, hey, like, yeah, I know there's going to be other podcasts that are teaching you how to have a good public school experience. I don't know. I just think everybody, that's actually what we think though. Like we really do think homeschooling is best.
A better option. Yeah. And so that's why we encourage people to look into it and see if they can figure out a way to do it. And I think what we're going to do over the next, I don't know how many podcasts, we'll go into a little more detail of how we homeschool and our methodology, if you want to call it that, and hopefully help some of you out there who are curious about how to do it and give you a sustainable way to homeschool and make it enjoyable for everybody and make it a place where your kids can learn and grow and develop into their own geniuses.
All right. Well, after all of that, I'm going to end with this.
Okay. What are you going to end with? This is
just
exciting.
Recently, as in like 2 weeks ago, a new Harvard study came out that talked about homeschooled children. Yeah, they really looked into it, and I think I was surprised to see what they came up with, because I know that Harvard historically has had some very anti-homeschooling professors.
Right.
But they applied
study.
The scientific method and were open to whatever the data suggested.
Oh boy. And
the study suggests that homeschooled children generally grow into well-adjusted, responsible, and socially engaged adults. It was researchers from the Human Flourishing Program, Brendan Case and Ying Chen.
Okay.
They presented their analysis based on data from over 12,000 children. They found in their study that homeschooled students were 23% less likely to attend college than public school students.
Okay.
Yet, the study said, They were more socially engaged and more likely to attend religious services than their public school counterparts. Educational, so this is what they said. These are some their findings. I want to read this whole thing because it's so good.
Okay.
Educational attainment matters a great deal, but it would take a peculiarly myopic parent to be indifferent to the loss of these broader goods so long as his child earned a bachelor's degree.
Okay.
And then
they're saying,
so what? You have a bachelor's degree, but
sacrifice something for this bachelor's degree.
Yeah, and they're going to go on and say parents want their kids to be well educated, and professionally successful, but they also want them to be healthy, happy, and virtuous.
Oh.
By this broader measure of success, homeschooling has advantages.
Okay.
And so it said, among the students we examined, homeschoolers were 33% more likely to volunteer, 31% more forgiving, and 51% more likely to attend religious services in young adulthood than those who attended public school.
Okay.
The investigators remarked that children who attend religious services are more apt to lead a successful life and stay away from drugs. The difference in religious participation has public health implications since those who attend services regularly have substantially lower risk of alcohol and drug abuse, depression, and suicide. They also have a lower risk of premature death for any reason than those who never attend.
Wow.
Pretty crazy, right?
Wow.
That's the one thing that people are like, but what about college? And it's like, yeah, they are less likely to go to college. And there are reasons behind that.
Uh-huh.
I think it's actually because they choose not to, not because they can't.
No, yeah, it's because the world is more open to them. They realize there's not just this one path to success.
But like, it's so funny to me sometimes. It's like, have we forgotten that we're not raising children so they can go to college?
Right.
I thought we were raising children so they can be happy.
Well, this is and this is a question. What are your goals for your children?
Yeah.
And that's, again, a whole nother conversation probably. But apparently homeschool people or homeschool parents may have a different idea of what is good for their kids, which is that they be happy, healthy, virtuous.
Successful.
And that kind of helps them attain success.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty
Enough said, right?
Yeah, that's a mic drop kind of situation where that's it. There you go.
And isn't it interesting that going to school makes you less likely? I mean, I think I read that early on in homeschooling, I read that parents or children who were homeschooled, 90% of them kept the faith tradition of their parents.
Right. Yeah.
Where public school children, only 50% did. And that's worldview, folks.
Right. That's a
worldview.
huge part of it.
Yeah.
So if those are their hopes for your children, then you should look into homeschooling.
Obviously, the studies show that if you want children that are less likely to abuse substances, more likely to be emotionally healthy, and more likely to be people of faith.
And happy. Less depression.
Then your safest route to that is homeschooling.
Right.
Now you might be like, okay, but how?
Right.
It's like, well, we'll get to that.
We'll go into that.
Yeah.
And
in another podcast.
I think, and in a nutshell is don't worry so much because there are also studies that show even kids that stayed home and
did nothing
essentially for all their school time came out ahead of a lot of their peers that went to public school.
Yeah.
So children are incredibly resilient and
they're made to learn.
They're curious about the world. They're going to learn. And
unless you put them in really weird circumstances like a public school system.
Right, which is not actually a natural place for them to learn. It doesn't actually mimic
it's not super conducive
the learning environment that they should have. So anyways, I think a long and short of it is take the stress down.
Yeah.
And take the pressure off of your homeschooling and make it an enjoyable experience. And your children will learn.
Yeah, because I guess what we're saying at the end of the day is I think a lot of parents want all of these things for your kids, and they're very stressed about it often.
Yep.
But they're also really stressed about, but I can't homeschool.
Yeah, I'm not qualified, or I wouldn't know where to begin, whatever.
So it's like, let's take the stress down on both of those. What if I told you that there's a way for you to do this that feels natural and happy and enjoyable, and will make it much more likely that your children will become happy, successful adults. It's crazy.
This sounds like an MLM pitch.
I know.
What
It
if I
sounds
told
too
you?
easy, but that's what's so crazy about it. I'm telling you, I think the public school system is bonkers because it is doing all sorts of weird things and creating all sorts of worldviews and beliefs about themselves and all sorts of stuff.
And doesn't actually effectively teach your children
Yes,
or
it
help
doesn't
them
do
learn.
either one of those things. And it makes it your job as a parent much more difficult because you're unwinding those things all of the time when it's like, dude, there's a better way. And it's just
easier.
right over here. And it's so much better and it's easier and it's happier and it makes the whole thing better.
Yep.
I know some of you think we're crazy, but hey, somebody's got to have a crazy podcast.
Might as well be us. Okay. Well, we should probably end it there.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah, appreciate everyone coming along for the ride. And stick around for...
Stick around.
For the next episodes. That was good. That's a little Arnold Schwarzenegger quote for you. But yeah, stick around for the future episodes. We'll talk more about homeschooling. And if you're one of our patrons.
I feel
Oh my
patron.
goodness.
You'll have some extra bonus.
The extra bonus content, which will be we put out on Patreon. Oh man, I can't keep that straight.
He can't. That's all the time, by the way. He's saying it all the time.
I'm like an old man.
He cannot keep Patreon and patron straight.
All right. So glad you were here, and we look forward to talking to you next time.
Later.
See ya.